Chapter 6. What the Sea Returned. The path to the cove twisted through dense palms and wild hibiscus, the air thick with humidity and the scent of salt. Alexander ran beside Isla, their footsteps pounding against the earth, the fishermen leading them with frantic urgency. The closer they came, the heavier the air felt, as if the island itself were bracing for what they were about to see. When they reached the cliff overlooking the cove, Isla stopped so abruptly that Alexander nearly collided with her. Below them, the water churned in unnatural patterns. Spirals of foam, dark swells rising and falling as if something beneath the surface was shifting, breathing. And on the sand, something lay motionless. Alexander's stomach tightened. Isla's hand flew to her mouth. No. They hurried down the narrow path carved into the rock. The fisherman reached the body first, kneeling beside it with trembling hands. Alexander felt the world narrow to a single point. The shape on the sand, the stillness, the silence. But as they drew closer, he realized it wasn't a body. It was a boat. Or what was left of one. Splintered wood. Torn nets. A shattered lantern. And tangled in the wreckage, a shirt soaked and heavy with seawater. Isla knelt beside it, her fingers trembling as she lifted the fabric. "This is Mateo's cousin's," she whispered. "He wore this the night he disappeared." Alexander felt a coldness settle in his chest. The fisherman crossed himself. "The sea brought it back." Isla shook her head, her voice breaking. "No. The sea doesn't return things unless she wants to send a message." Alexander crouched beside her. "What message?" She looked at him then, eyes wide, haunted, shimmering with fear. "That you're not safe here." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, rising to her feet with a sudden, desperate energy. "We need to leave," she said. "Now. Before the tide changes." "Isla." "No." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You don't understand. The cove is waking. The currents are shifting. This is how it starts." "How what starts?" She hesitated, torn between truth and terror. "The island takes what it wants," she whispered. "And sometimes, it takes people who don't belong." Alexander stepped closer, refusing to let fear push her away. "I'm not leaving you. This isn't about me," she said, her voice trembling. "It's about you. You arrived the same week the sea changed. The same week the currents turned violent. The same week the island started calling." He felt the word settle into him like a stone dropped into deep water. "Calling." "Isla," he said softly, "I didn't come here to disappear. I came here to breathe again." "And what if the island doesn't want you to leave?" she whispered. A wave crashed against the rocks, louder, sharper, almost angry. The fisherman flinched. "We shouldn't be here." Isla grabbed Alexander's wrist, her grip tight, urgent. "Please. Come with me." He followed her without question. They climbed the path back to the cliff, the wind rising around them, whipping Isla's hair across her face. When they reached the top, she stopped, breathless, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sea was no longer calm. It churned with a strange, restless energy, as if something beneath the surface was shifting, awakening. Alexander stood beside her, chest heaving, heart pounding. "Isla," he said quietly, "tell me the truth. All of it." She closed her eyes, the wind tugging at her dress. "When my brother disappeared," she began, "I felt it. Before anyone told me. Before the boat washed ashore. I felt the island change. The air. The water. The silence." She turned to him, her voice barely a breath. "And last night, when you found that bracelet, I felt it again." Alexander swallowed hard. "You think the island wants something from me?" "I think," she whispered, "the island has chosen you." A shiver ran through him, not fear, not entirely, but something deeper. Something ancient. Something inevitable. He reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. "Then we face it together," he said. Her eyes softened, a flicker of hope, fragile but real. But before she could speak, a sound rose from the cove below. A low, resonant hum. Not wind. Not waves. Something else. Something alive. Isla's fingers tightened around his. And Alexander knew, whatever waited beneath the surface of this island paradise was no longer sleeping. It had awakened. And it had noticed him. Chapter 7. The House of Quiet Tides. The walk back from the cove was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence the island usually offered, warm, rhythmic, full of life, but a heavy, charged stillness that clung to the air like mist. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Isla walked ahead, her steps quick, her shoulders tense. Alexander followed close behind, watching the way her fingers curled and uncurled at her sides, as if she were fighting something inside herself. When they reached the edge of the village, she finally stopped. Her back rose and fell with uneven breaths. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her hands trembled. Alexander approached slowly, gently. Isla. She turned to him, and the look in her eyes nearly broke him. Fear, grief, and something else, something she was trying desperately to hide. You shouldn't have seen that, she whispered. I needed to, he replied. I need to understand what's happening. She shook her head, stepping back. No, you don't understand. The more you see, the more the island notices you. Then let it notice me. Her breath caught, a soft, wounded sound. Don't say that, she whispered. You don't know what you're inviting. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold, fragile, as if the sea had drained the warmth from her. Isla, he said softly, I'm not leaving you alone in this. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she let herself lean into him, her forehead resting against his chest, her breath trembling against his shirt. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her gently, as if she were something precious the world had been too harsh with. For a long moment they stayed like that, two souls suspended between fear and longing, between danger and desire. When she finally pulled back, her voice was barely a breath. Come with me. She led him through a narrow path behind the village, toward a small house perched on a rise overlooking the sea. It was simple, wooden shutters, a faded blue door, wind chimes made of shells, but it radiated warmth. This is my home, she said quietly. He stepped inside, and the space felt like stepping into her soul. Paintings lined the walls, swirling blues, fiery sunsets, stormy seas, gentle tides. Some were vibrant, alive. Others were dark, heavy, almost violent. He paused in front of one, a stormy cove, waves crashing against jagged rocks, a shadow beneath the surface. Isla's voice drifted from behind him. I painted that the night my brother disappeared. He turned to her, heart tightening. She stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, eyes distant. I felt something that night, she said. A shift. A pull. As if the island was choosing. Choosing what? Who it keeps, she whispered. And who it takes. He stepped toward her, slowly, carefully. And you think it's chosen me? I don't know, she said, voice trembling. But the signs, the currents, the bracelet, the boat. She swallowed hard. It's too much to ignore. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Then we face it together. Her eyes lifted to his, wide, vulnerable, searching. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough, he said. I know you're brave. I know you're hurting. I know you're trying to protect everyone but yourself. And I know that whatever this island is, it's not stronger than you. A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb. For a moment the world held its breath. Then Isla stepped closer, her voice barely audible. Alexander, I'm afraid of what loving someone here means. His heart stilled. Why? Because the island doesn't like to share, she whispered. A gust of wind swept through the open window, rattling the shell chimes. The sea roared in the distance, louder than before. Alexander took her hands in his, grounding her. Isla, I'm not afraid of this island. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. Then you should be. Outside the wind rose. The waves crashed harder. And somewhere deep beneath the surface the island stirred. Watching. Waiting. Choosing. Chapter 8. The Breath of the Island. The wind carried a strange electricity that morning. A subtle hum beneath the rustle of palm leaves, as if the island itself were inhaling. Alexander felt it the moment he stepped outside Isla's home. The air was thicker, heavier, charged with something he couldn't name. Isla stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She looked like a woman listening for a voice only she could hear. Do you feel it? She whispered. Alexander nodded. I don't know what it is, but yes. It's the shift, she murmured. The island is waking. He turned to her, searching her expression. Is that good or bad? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, her fingers brushing his wrist. A fleeting touch, but enough to send a quiet heat through him. "We need to go somewhere," she said. "Somewhere the island speaks clearly." "Where?" "The cliffs," she replied. "Where the wind carries truth." He didn't question her. He followed. The path to the cliffs wound through dense greenery, the sunlight filtering through leaves in shimmering patterns. Birds called from the branches, but even their songs felt subdued, as if nature itself were holding back. Isla walked ahead, her dress brushing the tall grass, her hair catching the light like strands of gold and shadow. Alexander watched her. The grace in her movements, the tension in her shoulders, the quiet strength she carried like a second skin. When they reached the cliffs, the world opened before them. The sea stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of turquoise and deep blue. Waves crashed against the rocks below, sending mist into the air. The wind was strong here, wild, untamed, alive. Isla closed her eyes and breathed deeply, as if drawing strength from the elements. "This is where I come when I need answers," she said softly. Alexander stepped beside her. "And what answers are you looking for now?" She hesitated, then turned to him, her eyes luminous with fear and longing. "You," she whispered. "I'm trying to understand why the island brought you here." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Her fingers intertwined with his, warm and trembling. "Maybe it wasn't the island," he said gently. "Maybe it was just life, fate, timing." She shook her head. "No, it's more than that. I felt something the moment you arrived. A shift. A pull. As if the island recognized you." "Recognized me?" he echoed. "Yes," she breathed. As if it had been waiting. A gust of wind swept between them, lifting her hair, brushing against his skin like a whisper. Alexander stepped closer, his voice low. What are you afraid of?" Her eyes softened, vulnerable, raw. "Of losing someone again. Of caring for someone the island might take." His chest tightened. "You won't lose me." "You can't promise that," she whispered. "I can promise I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression broke open. A dam giving way. A heart surrendering. She lifted her hand to his cheek, her touch feather-light. "You don't understand what this place can do." "Then show me," he said. "Let me in." Her breath trembled. "Alexander." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. He didn't. Their lips met, soft at first, tentative, a question asked in silence. Then deeper, warmer, as if the island itself exhaled around them. The wind wrapped around their bodies, the sea roared below, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the taste of her, the warmth of her, the truth of her. When they finally parted, Isla rested her forehead against his, her breath unsteady. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know," he murmured. "But it feels right." She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him, just for a heartbeat, just enough to feel safe. Then the wind shifted. A sudden sharp gust. A sound rising from the sea, low, resonant, almost like a voice. Isla's eyes snapped open. "No," she breathed. "Not now." Alexander turned toward the water. The waves were rising, not violently but deliberately, as if something beneath the surface was pushing upward. "What is that?" he asked. Isla grabbed his hand. "We need to leave. Now." "Isla." "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "The island is watching." Another wave crashed, louder, closer, sending spray high into the air. Alexander felt it then, a presence. Not imagined. Not subtle. Something beneath the water. Something aware. Something ancient. He tightened his grip on Isla's hand. "Then we face it together," he said. She looked at him, fear and love warring in her eyes. And for the first time she didn't argue. They ran from the cliffs, the wind howling behind them, the sea roaring like a warning. The island had awakened. And it had begun to choose. Chapter 9. The Echo Beneath the Waves. They didn't stop running until the cliffs were far behind them and the village roofs came back into view. The wind had calmed, but the air still vibrated with the memory of that strange, resonant hum, the sound that had risen from the sea like a warning. Isla slowed first, her breath uneven, her hand still gripping Alexander's. She didn't let go until they reached the shade of a large almond tree near the edge of the village. Only then did she turn to him. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with fear and something deeper, something she didn't want to name. "Alexander," she whispered, "you shouldn't have heard that." He wiped a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch gentle. "I hear what the island wants me to hear. That's what scares me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Isla, what was that sound?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the sea. "It's called the echo." "The echo." She nodded slowly. "It's rare. Most people never hear it. But when they do, it means the island is shifting. Choosing. Calling. Calling who?" Her eyes lifted to his, and the answer was clear before she spoke it. "You." A chill ran through him, not fear but recognition. As if some part of him had known this from the moment he stepped off the plane. "Why me?" he asked softly. "I don't know," she whispered. "But the island doesn't call without purpose." He took her hands in his, grounding her. "Then we find out what that purpose is. Together." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for a moment she needed more than she wanted to admit. But then she pulled back, her voice trembling. "There's something I haven't told you." Alexander's breath stilled. "What is it?" She looked away, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her dress. "When my brother disappeared, I wasn't just afraid. I felt something. A pull. A presence. Like the island was choosing him. And you think it's choosing me now?" "I don't want to believe it," she said, her voice breaking. "But the signs are the same. The currents. The hum. The way the sea reacts to you." He stepped closer, lifting her chin gently. "Isla, look at me." She did, reluctantly, vulnerably. "I'm not your brother," he said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes glistened. "You can't promise that." "I can promise I'll fight." "For what?" "For you." Her breath caught, a soft, fragile sound. For a moment the world around them faded. The village, the sea, the island's whispers. Until there was only the two of them standing beneath the almond tree, hearts beating in the same rhythm. But then a shadow moved at the edge of the path. A figure. Watching. Alexander turned sharply, but the figure slipped behind a palm tree before he could see their face. "Did you see that?" he asked. Isla's expression tightened. "Yes." "Who was it?" She swallowed hard. "Someone who shouldn't be here." "Isla." "We need to go," she said urgently. "Now." "Where?" "To someone who can help us understand what's happening." "Who?" She hesitated, then whispered a name that sent a ripple through the air. "Maria Del March." "Who is she?" "The island's oldest healer," Isla said. "She knows the sea better than anyone. And if the island is calling you, she'll know why." Alexander nodded. "Then let's go." Isla took his hand again, not out of fear this time but out of something deeper. Something like trust. Something like fate. As they walked toward the healer's home, the sea behind them whispered again, low, rhythmic, deliberate. And Alexander felt it. The echo. Calling him. Not with fear. Not with malice. With purpose. Chapter 10, The Healer of Tides. The walk to Maria Del Mar's home began in silence, but not the fearful kind that had followed them from the cliffs. This silence was softer. Warmer. Charged with something unspoken. Isla walked beside Alexander, her hand still in his. Not out of urgency now but out of instinct. Their fingers intertwined naturally as if the island itself had woven them together. The path was narrow, shaded by palms and flowering vines, and every time their shoulders brushed, a quiet spark passed between them. Alexander glanced at her, unable to stop himself. The morning light kissed her skin, turning her hair into a halo of gold and shadow. She looked fragile and fierce all at once. A woman shaped by beauty and loss, by the sea and its secrets. "You're quiet," he murmured. She didn't look at him, but her thumb brushed his hand in a slow, tender stroke. "I'm thinking." "About what?" A soft breath escaped her lips. "About you." His heart tightened, not with fear but with something deeper. Something he hadn't felt in years. "Is that good or bad?" he asked. She finally turned her head, meeting his gaze. Her eyes were warm, vulnerable, shimmering with a truth she hadn't yet spoken. "It's dangerous," she whispered. "But it feels right." He stopped walking, gently tugging her closer. "Isla." She stepped into him without hesitation, her body aligning with his as if she had been waiting for this moment. The world around them faded. The rustling leaves, the distant waves, even the island's watchful presence. Only she remained. Her breath mingled with his. Her heartbeat fluttered against his chest. Her lips parted, soft and inviting. "Alexander," she whispered, her voice trembling with longing and fear. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You don't have to be afraid of me." "I'm not afraid of you," she said. "I'm afraid of what I feel." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Then feel it." For a moment she did. She let herself melt into him, her hands sliding up his chest, her breath catching as their lips hovered a breath apart. But then, a sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, cold and sharp, breaking the spell. Isla flinched. Alexander felt it too. The shift, the presence, the island's breath brushing against their skin. "It's watching," she whispered. He took her hands again, grounding her. "Let it watch." Her eyes softened, but the fear didn't disappear. It settled deeper. "We should keep moving," she said quietly. "Maria Del Mar is waiting." The healer's home sat at the edge of the forest, perched above a small inlet where the water glowed an unnatural shade of blue. The house was old. Weathered wood, faded paint, wind chimes made of shells and bones. It looked like it had grown from the island itself. Isla hesitated at the door. "She's intense, but she knows things no one else does." Alexander nodded. "I'm ready." Isla knocked once. The door opened before her hand even fell. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, eyes sharp as moonlight. She wore a dress the color of storm clouds and a necklace of polished stones that glowed faintly. "Isla Mariposa," the woman said, her voice low and melodic. "You bring the sea's trouble to my door." Isla bowed her head slightly. "Maria Del Mar, we need your help." The healer's gaze shifted to Alexander. The moment her eyes met his, the air changed. She inhaled sharply, not in fear but in recognition. "You," she whispered. "So it is true." Alexander felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What's true?" Maria Del Mar stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "The island has chosen you." Isla's breath hitched. Alexander swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" The healer reached out, placing a hand over his heart. Her touch was warm, too warm, like sunlight pressed into skin. "It means," she said softly, "that your arrival was not an accident. The sea called you. The island marked you. And now, your fate is tied to hers." Isla grabbed Alexander's arm. "Maria, please. Tell us what's happening." The healer's eyes